The Minnesota Department of Transportation, in partnership with the Federal Highway Administration, the Metropolitan Council, Hennepin County, and the cities of Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and Minneapolis, are providing a series of introductory presentations about the environmental impact statement process for the Highway 252 I-94 corridor. This presentation is intended for community residents, businesses, and users of the Highway 252 I-94 corridor that may be impacted by a potential project, or for people that are just simply interested in what's going on with the Highway 252 I-94 project planning. The project alternatives will benefit and impact people in different ways. This presentation provides information on how project alternatives are developed, evaluated, and ultimately refined into a preferred alternative through the Highway 252 I-94 EIS process. Project alternatives are transportation improvements that address a project's purpose and need. With several refinements, project alternatives are identified in the early EIS phases to arrive at a reasonable and representative range of project alternatives that first look to avoid, second minimize, and third mitigate impacts to the environment and community resources. The Highway 252 I-94 EIS project will use 4 steps to develop, evaluate, and determine the preferred alternative. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are completed in the scoping phase, and Step 4 is completed in the draft EIS phase. Step 1 identifies separate improvements that meet the purpose and need of the project and do not have fatal flaws like destroying a high-quality, significant environmental resource that cannot be replaced. Step 2 combines the separate improvements into a set of corridor project alternatives that are different from one another. These alternatives can include locations for access to the corridor, sidewalk and trail, transit options, number of lanes, things like that. Step 3 puts the list of alternatives through additional analysis and evaluation with consideration of public comments to help determine which alternatives should be studied and developed more in the draft EIS phase. Step 4 is the final stage of analysis, review, refinement, and evaluation. This step has a couple of cycles of analysis, evaluation, and alternative refinement before a preferred alternative is determined. Public involvement occurs with each of these steps in various ways. Previous studies have been completed for the Highway 252 and I-94 corridors. Significant analysis was completed and many alternatives were reviewed and developed as part of the previous studies. The current EIS process will consider the previous analysis and alternatives. New alternatives and ideas will also be considered and developed because no decisions have been made yet. Public engagement is conducted throughout this phase. Input received is used to develop new project alternatives and refine previous ones. Then the input is considered as the alternatives are evaluated and screened using the evaluation criteria. Not everyone will agree on all alternatives, but that is why there is a range of alternatives to consider. The project alternatives will be shown as stick drawings early in the process, like the image in the upper left here. These drawings will show where the roadway is, where access is provided, how many lanes the roadway will have, statements about possible dedicated transit on the roadway, or dedicated walking and biking paths. These drawings aren't detailed enough to see impacts or know if property will be affected. Later in the scoping process, as the alternatives are moved through the steps, likely late in Step 2 or early in Step 3, the alternatives will be shown with more detail to better understand what an alternative might look like and the impacts it will have, like the images to the right on the screen. In the draft EIS phase, Step 4 refines project alternatives with more detail as analysis continues. This analysis includes more in-depth evaluation using the evaluation criteria plus preliminary design for a reduced number of build alternatives. Agency partners, with public input, will work to determine a preferred alternative. During the draft EIS, all project alternatives that were advanced from the scoping process are compared at the same level of detail. There are 2 phases of analysis and evaluation in the draft EIS. In Step 4, Phase 1, access types and intersection designs are determined for each alternative. In the second phase of Step 4, the remaining project alternatives are compared to the no-build alternative. The no-build alternative is included as a baseline to compare impacts from the build project alternatives to doing nothing. A preferred alternative will be selected in the draft EIS phase, which could turn out to be the no-build or do-nothing alternative. As mentioned, the concept drawings are refined with more detail as design decisions are made. These images are presented to the public for comment. Preliminary design for a reduced number of alternatives provides even more detail and can help determine impacts to specific properties or benefits to the surrounding environment by avoiding impacts. The preferred alternative addresses the purpose and need of the project and seeks to provide benefits and tries to minimize project impacts to the surrounding area. Developing phasing for the project is important to understand if it can be built as one large project or if it is more practical to build the preferred alternative as smaller individual projects over time that build up to the complete preferred alternative. This project phasing will include expected timeline for construction and potential funding opportunities to plan and build the projects. To summarize, the results of the project alternative development process are: the scoping process produces a range of project alternatives that meet the purpose and need without fatal flaws, and the draft EIS process refines the alternatives and conducts more detailed analysis to determine a preferred alternative. The public engagement process is conducted throughout and critical for the success of this project. Thank you for your interest in the Highway 252 I-94 EIS. We hope you will check out some of the other EIS 101 virtual education materials available on the Highway 252 I-94 project website. They include short presentations like this one that provide background on the project or discuss other EIS process elements. You can share comments, find out what's happening next, and stay connected through the project website. Sign up for project updates by sharing your email address with us. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.